But mom, we are having fun, Archie protested. We are going home, Benita repeated, dragging him towards their apartment. She refused to let Joshua explain or talk to either of them. Back in their apartment, Archie looked up at his mom with worried eyes. Mom, is everything okay? He asked softly. Benita sighed and tried to calm herself. It's none of your business, Archie, she snapped, and stay away from Joshua. Benita was a beautiful lady who works in a big company in the bustling city of Lagos. She lived alone in a comfortable apartment that overlooked the busy streets below. Every morning, Benita woke up early, ready to take on the day with energy and enthusiasm. She worked diligently as a manager in the big company, giving her all to her job. Her colleagues admired her dedication and hardworking spirit. In her late 20s, Benita's life took a wonderful turn when she had a son named Archie. Archie was a bright and beautiful young boy who brought immense joy to Benita's life. At just 8 years old, he was full of energy and curiosity. Archie loved watching cartoons, and every Saturday morning, he would sit in the living room, eyes glued to the screen, laughing at the funny characters and their adventures. Playing football was another of his favorite activities. Archie and his friends would gather at the nearby park, kicking the ball around and pretending to be their favorite football stars. Benita made sure that Archie attended the best school in the city. She wanted him to have the best education possible. Every day after work, Benita would drive to his school to pick him up. She didn't want to employ a nanny for Archie because she believed that spending time with him and being involved in his life was the most important thing she could do. She took full responsibility for him, ensuring that he always felt loved and cared for. In the evenings, after a long day at work, Benita and Archie would spend quality time together. They loved each other so much and cherished every moment they spent as a family. Benita would help Archie with his homework, patiently explaining the answers to his many questions. Mom, why is the sky blue? Archie would ask, his eyes wide with curiosity. Benita would smile and say, the sky looks blue because of the way the sunlight interacts with the Earth's atmosphere. Isn't that amazing, Archie? Archie would nod, fascinated by her explanation. He loved learning new things, and Benita enjoyed teaching him. She made sure that he ate healthy meals, cooking delicious and nutritious food that he loved. She often prepared his favorite dishes, like jollof rice with grilled chicken and a side of steamed vegetables. Mom, this is the best jollof rice ever, Archie would exclaim, his mouth full of food. Thank you, Archie, Benita would reply, her heart swelling with pride. I'm glad you like it. Benita also taught Archie how to be a good child. She encouraged him to be kind and respectful to others, to always tell the truth, and to be responsible. She would often say, Archie, remember to always be kind. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Archie listened to his mom carefully, taking her advice to heart. He was a confident and curious child, always eager to learn and explore. He did well at school, earning good grades and making his mom proud. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Archie looked up at his mom and asked, Mom, can you tell me a story before bed? Benita smiled and nodded. Of course, Archie. What kind of story would you like to hear? A story about a brave knight, Archie said, his eyes shining with excitement. Benita began to tell him a story about a brave knight who went on a grand adventure to save a kingdom. Archie listened intently, his imagination painting vivid pictures in his mind. And the knight fought the dragon bravely. Benita said, her voice filled with excitement, and saved the kingdom from danger. Wow, Mom, that was a great story, Archie said, clapping his hands. I'm glad you liked it, Archie, Benita replied, giving him a warm hug. Now, it's time for bed. Archie brushed his teeth and got into his pajamas. Benita tucked him into bed, planting a gentle kiss on his forehead. Good night, my little knight, she whispered. Good night, Mom, Archie replied, closing his eyes with a smile on his face. As Benita watched her son drift off to sleep, she felt a deep sense of happiness and fulfillment. Archie was her world, and she was determined to give him the best life possible. She knew that the love and care she poured into raising him would help him grow into a kind and responsible person. The next morning, the routine began again. Benita woke up early and prepared breakfast and got Archie ready for school. Mom, can I have pancakes today? Archie asked, his eyes lighting up at the thought. Sure, Archie, Benita replied with a smile. She quickly whipped up a batch of fluffy pancakes, serving them with syrup and fresh fruit. These are delicious, Mom, Archie exclaimed as he dug into his breakfast. I'm glad you like them, Benita said, watching him eat with joy. After breakfast, they headed out the door. Benita dropped Archie off at school, giving him a big hug before he ran off to join his friends. Have a great day at school, Archie, she called after him. I will, Mom, Archie shouted back, waving as he disappeared into the building. At work, Benita remained focused and efficient. She handled meetings, managed projects, and ensured that everything ran smoothly. Her colleagues often came to her for advice and guidance, knowing that she was always willing to help. In the afternoon, Benita would pick Archie up from school. They would talk about their day during the drive home. Mom, guess what we learned in school today? Archie would say excitedly. What did you learn, Archie? Benita would ask, eager to hear about his day. We learned about space and the planets. Did you know that Jupiter is the biggest planet in our solar system? Archie would say, his face beaming with excitement. That's amazing, Archie. Benita would reply, impressed by his knowledge. You are learning so much. Once they got home, they would spend time together. Sometimes they played board games, other times they watched cartoons or read books. Benita cherished those moments, knowing that they were creating precious memories. As time went by, a man named Joshua moved into the same estate where Benita and Archie lived. He rented the apartment next door to them. Joshua was a tall man with a kind smile and friendly eyes. One sunny afternoon, he decided to introduce himself to his new neighbors. He knocked on Benita's door, and when she opened it, he greeted her warmly. Hello, I'm Joshua. I just moved in next door and wanted to say hi, he said, smiling. Benita returned his smile. Hi, Joshua, I'm Benita, and this is my son Archie, she replied, gesturing to Archie, who was peeking from behind her leg. Archie stepped forward, looking up at Joshua with wide eyes. Hi, Mr. Joshua, he said excitedly. Hi there, Archie, Joshua replied, bending down to be at eye level with the boy. It's nice to meet you. Archie was thrilled to meet Joshua. After a few more polite words, Joshua waved goodbye and headed back to his apartment. As soon as he left, Archie turned to his mom with a big grin. Mom, I like Mr. Joshua. You should marry him, Archie said earnestly. Benita couldn't help but laugh. Oh, Archie, it doesn't work like that, she said, ruffling his hair. Don't worry about adult matters. Just focus on your studies, okay? Archie nodded, though he was still smiling at the idea. Over the next few days, Archie and Joshua began to see more of each other. Whenever Joshua was outside, Archie would run up to him, eager to chat or play. Joshua was always kind and patient with him, answering his many questions, and sometimes even play football with him in the small yard. Hey Archie, ready to play some football? Joshua would call out, holding a soccer ball. Yes, Mr. Joshua, let's play. Archie would shout back, running over with excitement. Joshua would show Archie new tricks and techniques, teaching him how to kick the ball with precision and control. They would laugh and cheer as they played, and it didn't take long for Archie to start looking forward to their sessions. One day, Joshua offered to help Archie with his homework. Benita was initially hesitant, but she saw how much Archie liked Joshua and decided to give it a try. Mom, can Mr. Joshua help me with my math homework? Archie would ask, holding his math book. Benita glanced at Joshua, who nodded with a smile. Sure, if Mr. Joshua doesn't mind, she said. I'll be happy to help, Joshua replied. Let's see what you are working on, Archie. They sat at the kitchen table, and Joshua patiently explained the math problems to Archie. He used simple terms and made sure Archie understood each step. Archie was thrilled to have someone to help him, and he started doing better in his studies. Wow, Mr. Joshua, you make math so fun, Archie said, grinning. I'm glad you think so, Archie, Joshua replied. Learning can be fun if you understand it. Joshua also bought Archie small gifts from time to time. He brought him a new football, some comic books, and even a puzzle set. Each time, Archie was delighted and thanked Joshua enthusiastically. Thank you, Mr. Joshua. This is the best gift ever, Archie would exclaim, hugging his new toy. At first, Benita wasn't entirely comfortable with the amount of time Joshua and Archie were spending together. She worried about the influence Joshua might have on her son. But as she observed them more, she saw how genuinely kind and caring Joshua was towards Archie. She started to relax and allow their bond to grow. One evening, Joshua shared a bit about his life with Benita. They sat on her porch, enjoying the cool evening breeze. I used to live abroad, Joshua said. I recently returned to focus on my company here in Lagos. What kind of business do you run? Benita asked, curious. I have a tech company. We develop software solutions for businesses, Joshua exclaimed. It's challenging but rewarding work. Benita nodded. That sounds impressive. It must be nice to be back home. It is, Joshua agreed. I miss the warmth and the sense of community here. As they talked, Benita realized how easy it was to open up to Joshua. He was a good listener, and she found herself enjoying their conversations. They began to spend more time together, often sharing meals. Joshua, would you like to join us for dinner tonight? Benita asked one evening. I would love to, Joshua replied, smiling. Over dinner, they laughed and shared stories. Archie loved having Joshua around and often chimed in with his own tales from school. Mr. Joshua, guess what happened at school today? Archie would start, launching into an animated recount of his day. Benita became more comfortable with Joshua being a part of their lives. Sometimes, Archie would stay at Joshua's place, playing games or watching movies. On nights when Archie fell asleep at Joshua's apartment, Joshua would gently carry him back to Benita's place. Thank you, Joshua, Benita would say as she tucked Archie into bed. He really enjoys spending time with you. It's my pleasure, Joshua would reply. Archie is a great kid. One weekend, Joshua suggested they all go to the beach. Archie was thrilled at the idea. Mom, can we please go to the beach with Mr. Joshua? Archie begged, his eyes sparkling with excitement. All right, we can go, Benita agreed, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. At the beach, they had a wonderful time. They built sand castles, played in the water, and enjoyed a picnic. Archie's laughter filled the air as he and Joshua splashed around in the waves. Look, Mom, we made the biggest sandcastle ever, Archie shouted. showing off their creation. It's amazing, Archie, Benita replied, taking a picture of her son and Joshua with the sand castle. The day at the beach brought them even closer together. Benita saw how much joy Joshua brought into Archie's life and appreciated his presence more and more. In the following weeks, their bond continued to grow. Joshua often came over for meals, and they shared many more happy moments together. Benita felt grateful for the positive influence Joshua had on Archie. She knew that their little family had been blessed with a wonderful friend and neighbor in Joshua. As they sat together one evening, Archie looked at Joshua and said, "Mr. Joshua, you are like a father to me." Joshua smiled warmly, "And you are like a son to me, Archie." Benita's heart swelled with happiness. She knew that with Joshua's friendship and support, their lives were richer and more joyful than ever before. When Joshua got home that night, he felt different. His thoughts kept cycling back to Archie and the strong bond they had formed. He thought about the resemblance between him and Archie, the closeness, and the love they shared. It felt almost as if they were family. Joshua couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something deeper connecting them. He also thought about Benita and the way she welcomed him into their lives. As he lay in bed, he decided that he needed to ask her about Archie's father. He wanted to understand more about their family. At Benita's apartment, she felt so happy about Joshua's presence in their lives. Archie's laughter and smiles had increased, and the warmth Joshua brought to their home was undeniable. Benita couldn't deny that having Joshua around made everything feel brighter and better. The next morning, Joshua called Benita and asked if he could drop Archie off at school. Benita agreed, but insisted that they all go together because her car broke down. She thought it would be a nice way to start the day as a little group. "Sure, Joshua, but we'll all go together. My car is at the mechanic," Benita said over the phone. "That sounds great, Benita," Joshua replied. "I will pick you up at 7:30. When Joshua arrived, Archie was bouncing with excitement. "Mr. Joshua, I can't wait to go to school with you today." Benita smiled as she locked the door behind them. They all climbed into Joshua's car and drove off. The ride was filled with cheerful chatter and laughter. After dropping Archie at school, Joshua offered to drop Benita at office too. "Benita, can I drop you off at your office?" Joshua asked. "Sure, Joshua, that would be nice," Benita replied, settling into the passenger seat. As they drove, they talked about various things. The conversation flowed easily until Joshua decided to bring up the topic that had been on his mind. "Benita, I've been wanting to ask you about Archie's father," Joshua asked carefully. Benita's smile faded. "Please, Joshua, don't ask me about that," she replied, her voice tense. "But Benita, I feel like I'm becoming a part of your family." Joshua insisted. "I just want to understand more about you and Archie." Benita's face hardened. "Joshua, this is crossing a line," she said firmly. "Don't mistake my kindness for stupidity. This is none of your business." Joshua was taken aback. "I'm sorry, Benita. I didn't mean to upset you," he said, his voice filled with regret. Benita's anger fled. "Stop the car," she demanded. Joshua pulled over to the side of the road, and Benita opened the door. "I will walk from here," she said coldly, "and stay away from us." Joshua watched her walk away, feeling a mix of guilt and confusion. He didn't mean to upset her, but he also felt that he needed to know more to understand his place in their lives. Later that evening, after work, Benita went to pick Archie from school, only to find out that Joshua had already picked him up. Her anger resurfaced. She drove home quickly and knocked on Joshua's door. When he opened it and tried to talk to her, she ignored him and went inside to get Archie. "Archie, we are going home," she said sternly, taking his hand. "But Mom, we are having fun," Archie protested. "We are going home." Benita repeated, dragging him towards their apartment. She refused to let Joshua explain or talk to either of them. Back in their apartment, Archie looked up at his mom with worried eyes. Mom, is everything okay? He asked softly. Benita sighed and tried to calm herself. It's none of your business, Archie, she snapped, and stay away from Joshua. Archie's eyes filled with tears, and he ran to his room crying. Benita's heart ached as she realized she had taken out her frustration on her innocent son. She went to his room and found him cuddled up on his bed, sobbing. Archie, I'm so sorry, Benita said, sitting beside him and hugging him tightly. I shouldn't have yelled at you. Archie sniffled and looked up at her. Why are you mad at Mr. Joshua, Mom? He's our friend. Benita stroked his hair gently. It's just a grown-up problem, Archie. I didn't mean to upset you. I promise I won't yell at you again. Archie hugged her tightly. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Archie, Benita whispered, holding him close. Archie eventually fell asleep in her arms, feeling comfortable by his mother's embrace. Benita sat there for a while, thinking about the events of the day. She knew she needed to sort out her feelings and figure out how to handle the situation with Joshua. But for now, her priority was to make sure Archie felt safe and loved. She kissed his forehead and whispered a silent prayer for strength and guidance. Back at Joshua's apartment, he felt so bad about everything that had happened. He couldn't stop thinking about the argument with Benita and the hot look in her eyes. As the night grew darker, his guilt grew stronger. He decided that he couldn't let things remain this way. Summoning his courage, he walked over to Benita's door and knocked. When Benita opened the door, she was surprised to see Joshua standing there. Why are you disturbing our peace? She asked, her voice still holding a hint of anger from earlier. Joshua looked at her with sincere eyes. Benita, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I won't leave until you forgive me, he said earnestly. I promise I won't ask any more personal questions. Benita saw the genuine regret in his eyes. After a moment of silence, she sighed. All right, come in, she said, stepping aside to let him enter. Joshua walked in, feeling a wave of relief. Benita went to the kitchen and made some tea. They sat down on the sofa, each with a warm cup in their hands. Joshua, I know you mean well, Benita started, but some things are just too painful to talk about. I understand, Benita. I'm really sorry for pushing you, Joshua replied. I just care about you and Archie a lot. Benita nodded, appreciating his honesty. Let's just move on from this, okay? Agreed, Joshua said with a smile. I really value our friendship. As they sipped their tea, they started talking about lighter things. They shared stories from their childhood, laughed about funny incidents at work, and discussed their favorite movies and books. The tension from earlier melted away as they reconnected and reconciled their differences. It was a long conversation, and neither of them realized how late it had become. Slowly, they both dozed off on the sofa, feeling content and at peace. Early the next morning, Archie woke up and came downstairs to the living room. He was surprised to see his mom and Joshua cuddled up together, sleeping peacefully. With a big smile, he shouted, Are you two married now? Benita and Joshua woke up with a start, immediately separating from each other. They looked at Archie, who was standing there with a huge grin in his face. Good morning, Archie, Benita said, trying to hide her embarrassment. We are not married. Archie laughed and ran to hug both of them. You should get married and become my mom and dad, he exclaimed. Benita and Joshua exchanged a glance, both smiling. All right, Archie, Benita said, standing up. Let's get you ready for school. After taking Archie to his room, Benita and Joshua shared a quiet moment in the kitchen. He really likes you, Benita said softly. I really like him too, Joshua replied. And I really like you, Benita. Benita looked into Joshua's eyes and saw the sincerity there. She felt a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. I like you too, Joshua, she said with a shy smile. From that day on, their relationship began to blossom. They started spending more time together, and their bond grew stronger. They would hang out, go on dates, and talk about their favorite things. They enjoyed exploring new restaurants, taking walks in the park, and even cooking meals together. One evening, they decided to go to a small cozy cafe that Joshua had found. It was tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, with soft music playing in the background and the aroma of freshly baked pastries filling the air. This place is lovely, Joshua, Benita said as they sat down at a corner table. I thought you might like it, Joshua replied, smiling. It's one of my favorite spots. As they sipped their coffee and chatted, Benita felt a sense of happiness and contentment that she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized that Joshua was becoming a very important part of her life. Another day, they took Archie to the zoo. Archie was thrilled to see all the animals and had a wonderful time. Look, Mom, look, Mr. Joshua, the lions are so big, Archie exclaimed, pointing excitedly at the lion enclosure. They sure are, Archie, Joshua said, lifting him up so he could get a better view. Aren't they amazing? Yes, this is the best day ever, Archie shouted, his face lighting up with joy. Benita watched them with a smile, her heart swelling with happiness. She loved seeing Joshua and Archie bond so well. It felt like they were becoming a real family. One evening, after Archie had gone to bed, Benita and Joshua sat at the balcony, enjoying the cool night breeze. Joshua, I never thought I would find someone who makes me feel this way, Benita said, looking up at the stars. I feel the same way, Benita, Joshua replied, taking her hand in his. I'm so grateful to have you and Archie in my life. Benita smiled, feeling tears of happiness well up in her eyes. Thank you for being here, Joshua. Thank you for letting me be a part of your lives, Joshua said, squeezing her hand gently. Their relationship continued to grow, and they found themselves falling in love with each other. Archie was happier than ever, seeing his mom and Joshua together. He loved spending time with them, and the three of them became inseparable. One afternoon, as they all sat in the living room playing a board game, Archie looked up at them and said, I'm so happy, Mom. I'm so happy, Mr. Joshua. You make us so happy. Benita and Joshua looked at each other and smiled. They knew that they had found something truly special. Their journey had brought them together, and they were ready to face whatever the future held as a family. One night, Archie became very sick. He started running a high temperature, and Benita became extremely worried. She didn't know what to do and felt a wave of panic wash over her. In her distress, she called Joshua immediately. Joshua, please come quickly. Archie is very sick, she said, her voice trembling. I'll be right there, Benita. Hang in there. Joshua replied, already grabbing his keys and rushing out the door. When Joshua arrived, he found Benita cradling Archie, who was burning up with fever. Without wasting any time, they both rushed Archie to the hospital. As soon as they arrived, the nurses were there to attend to them immediately, seeing the urgency in Benita's eyes. The doctor came in and started examining Archie while Benita and Joshua stood at the reception area, restless and anxious. Benita couldn't sit still. She walked up and down the hallway, wringing her hands, while Joshua tried his best to comfort her. It's going to be okay, Benita. Archie is strong, Joshua said, trying to soothe her. I know, but I'm just so scared, Benita replied, her eyes filled with tears. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor emerged from the examination room and asked them to follow him to his office. With their hearts pounding, they walked in and sat down, waiting for the doctor to speak. Archie needs a blood transfusion immediately, the doctor began. His condition is critical, and we need to act fast. Without hesitation, Benita spoke up. Doctor, Archie is my son. Please, take my blood. The doctor nodded and ordered a nurse to test Benita's blood. Moments later, the nurse returned with a concerned look on her face. I'm sorry, but your blood isn't a match, she said softly. Fear gripped Benita. She looked at Joshua with desperation in her eyes. The doctor suggested they test Joshua's blood too, and Joshua agreed eagerly, hoping he could help. Please, test my blood. I will do anything to help Archie, Joshua said, rolling up his sleeve. The nurse took Joshua's blood sample and hurried away to test it. The wait felt excruciatingly long, but finally, the nurse returned with good news. Joshua's blood is a match, she announced. Joshua immediately went to donate his blood. Benita watched with tears in her eyes, feeling a mixture of gratitude and relief. When the doctors were done, they summoned Benita and Joshua to come in and see Archie. Archie was awake and smiled weakly when he saw them. Mom, Mr. Joshua, he said softly. Benita and Joshua rushed to his bedside. Archie, you are so brave, Benita said, kissing his forehead. We are so proud of you, buddy, Joshua added, holding Archie's hand. Archie smiled. Thank you for staying with me, he said, looking at them both with gratitude. They sat close to his bed, talking to him and telling him how amazing he was. They played little games and read him stories to keep his spirits up. Benita knew Archie needed to eat, so she decided to go home and prepare some food. Joshua, I will go home and make some food for Archie. Can you stay with him? She asked. Of course, Benita. I'll be right here, Joshua replied, giving her a reassuring smile. Benita went home, feeling grateful for Joshua's support and encouragement. She quickly prepared Archie's favorite meal, determined to bring him something nutritious and comforting. Meanwhile, Joshua sat beside Archie's bed at the hospital, watching him sleep. He couldn't shake off the gnawing feeling that there was something more connecting him to Archie. Joshua looked at Archie's peaceful face, trying to figure out the mystery. How could it be that his blood was a perfect match for Archie? When Archie woke up, he turned to Joshua and said, Daddy? Joshua was taken aback but smiled warmly. Hey, buddy, he said, his heart swelling with emotion. They talked for a while, with Joshua telling Archie funny stories and making him laugh. Soon, Benita returned with the food. She thanked Joshua for staying with Archie and made sure Archie ate some food. Joshua then decided to go home to freshen up and promised to return later. When he got home, Joshua felt an overwhelming need to talk to someone. He called his best friend Maurice, who lived abroad. Maurice, I need to talk to you, Joshua said, his voice filled with urgency. What's going on, Josh? Maurice asked, concerned. Joshua explained everything, how Archie got sick, the blood transfusion, and the strange feeling that Archie might be connected to him in a way he couldn't explain. Josh, are you saying you think Archie could be your son? Maurice asked, trying to make sense of it all. It sounds crazy, but yes, there is just something about him. And the blood match, Joshua replied. Think carefully, Josh. Did you ever have an affair with Benita while you were drunk or something? Maurice probed. No, Maurice. I have never been that drunk before. It doesn't make sense, Joshua said, frustrated. Then, there is only one way to find out for sure. You need to run a DNA test, Maurice suggested. Secretly, of course, just to clear your doubts, Maurice added. Joshua felt a mix of worry and determination. You are right, Maurice. I need to know the truth, he said. After the phone call, Joshua couldn't stop thinking about the possibility. He decided to follow Maurice's advice and run a DNA test in secret. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he had to know if Archie was really his son. With a heavy heart, he made plans to get the test done, hoping that the truth would finally give him the answers he needed. The next day, Benita needed to go to her office to collect some important documents. She felt confident leaving Archie in Joshua's care, knowing he would look after him well. Archie was still recovering and needed rest, so he spent most of his time sleeping. Joshua sat beside Archie's bed, watching over him. As he looked at the peaceful boy, his mind was filled with questions and uncertainty. He knew he needed to follow through with his plan. Quietly, he took a small pair of scissors and carefully clipped a tiny piece of Archie's fingernail. He made sure to keep it safe, placing it in a small clean envelope. When Benita returned from her office, Joshua greeted her with a smile, though he was feeling anxious inside. "Benita, I need to attend an important meeting. I will be back soon," he said, hoping she wouldn't notice his nervousness. "All right, Joshua, just come back as soon as you can, okay?" Benita replied. As Joshua was about to leave, Archie called out to him, "Daddy, please come back on time," Archie said, his eyes looking up at Joshua with trust and love. Joshua's heart melted. "I will, I promise," he replied, giving Archie a reassuring smile before heading out the door. Joshua drove straight to a maternity hospital where his friend, Dr. Ben, worked. Dr. Ben was a trustworthy and discreet friend, someone Joshua knew he could rely on in this delicate situation. When Joshua arrived, Dr. Ben greeted him warmly. "Joshua, my friend, what brings you here today?" Dr. Ben asked, noticing the tension in Joshua's demeanor. "Ben, I need your help," Joshua said, taking a deep breath. "I need you to run a DNA test for me, but it has to be done without the mother knowing." Dr. Ben raised an eyebrow, sensing the seriousness of the request. "Joshua, this is highly unusual and risky. Are you sure about this?" "Yes, Ben. I need to know if Archie is my son. Please, you have to help me," Joshua pleaded. Dr. Ben sighed, contemplating the situation. "All right, Joshua, I will do it. But you need to understand the potential consequences." "I understand, Ben. Thank you," Joshua said, handing over the envelope containing Archie's fingernail. Dr. Ben took the sample and assured Joshua that he would handle everything discreetly. "The results will be ready in 48 hours. I will let you know as soon as I have them," he said. Joshua thanked his friend and left the hospital, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. The next 2 days would be the longest of his life, filled with restless anticipation. Later that day, Benita called Joshua to inform him that Archie had been discharged from the hospital. "Joshua, can you come pick us up? Archie is ready to go home now," she said. "I'm on my way," Joshua replied, hurrying to the hospital. When he arrived, Archie greeted him with a tight hug. "Daddy, you are here." "Yes, buddy, let's get you home," Joshua said, lifting Archie gently into the car. The journey home was quiet. Archie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from his time in the hospital. Benita noticed Joshua's unusually quiet demeanor and turned to him. "Joshua, is everything all right? You seem a bit off," she asked, concerned. Joshua forced a smile. "Everything is fine, Benita. Just a lot on my mind," he replied, not wanting to worry her. When they got home, they carefully carried Archie to his room and tucked him into bed. Benita and Joshua stood by his bedside for a moment, watching him sleep. Joshua's mind was racing with thoughts about the DNA test and what the result might reveal. "I need to go see a friend," Joshua said suddenly, feeling the need to be alone and think. Okay, Joshua, take care, Benita replied, giving him a puzzled look but not pressing further. Joshua went back to his apartment and sat down, his mind swelling with confusion and worry. He poured himself a drink, hoping it would calm his nerves. As he sipped the drink, he thought about the possibility that Archie could be his son. How could this be? He had never met Benita before moving into the estate, or at least he didn't think he had. He tried to piece together any potential clues or memories, but found nothing that made sense. Joshua's mind kept returning to the fact that his blood was a perfect match for Archie's. It seemed too coincidental, too perfect to be anything but the truth. But how? He picked up his phone and called Maurice again, needing his friend's perspective. Maurice, I'm losing my mind here, Joshua said as soon as Maurice answered. Calm down, Josh. What happened? Maurice asked. I got the test done. The result will be out in 48 hours. But I'm so confused, Maurice. If Archie is my son, how did this happen? I have never met Benita before. Joshua explained, his voice filled with frustration. Josh, you need to stay calm and wait for the results. Maybe there is something you are missing. Think about any possible connection, Maurice suggested. I have thought about it over and over. There is nothing, no affair, no chance encounters, nothing that makes sense, Joshua replied. Sometimes life throws us unexpected surprises. Just hang in there, Josh. Once you have the result, you can figure out the next step, Maurice said. Thanks, Maurice. I will try to stay calm, Joshua said, feeling slightly reassured by his friend's words. After ending the call, Joshua sat back and tried to relax, but his mind kept racing. He knew that once he had the DNA test result, he would have to face the truth, whatever it may be. For now, all he could do was wait and hope for clarity. As he sat there, the hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Joshua couldn't help but wonder about the potential outcomes and how they would change his life. He thought about Benita and how she would react if Archie was indeed his son. He also worried about how Archie would feel, the confusion and questions that would arise. With a heavy heart, Joshua decided to take it one step at a time. He knew that whatever the result showed, he would handle it with care and love for Archie and Benita. All he could do now was wait for those 48 hours to pass and hope that the answers he sought would bring some peace to his restless mind. 48 hours had passed, and Joshua's anxiety had reached its peak. He could barely sleep the night before, the thought of the DNA test results consuming his every waking moment. As soon as he could, he rushed back to the hospital to see Dr. Ben. When he arrived, Dr. Ben was waiting for him with an envelope in hand. Here are the results, Joshua, he said, handing the envelope over. Joshua's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. His eyes scanned the document, and his heart nearly stopped. His suspicion was confirmed. He was indeed Archie's father. Joshua was stunned, trying to comprehend the reality of the situation. How could this be? He had never met Benita before moving into the estate. Feeling overwhelmed, Joshua thanked Dr. Ben and left the hospital, the document clutched tightly in his hand. As he drove home, he called Maurice to share the shocking news. Maurice, it's true. Archie is my son, Joshua said, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and emotion. What? Are you serious? Maurice responded, equally shocked. How is that possible? You need to figure out how this happened. I know, Maurice. I've been thinking about it non-stop. But the more I think about it, the more confused I get. Joshua replied, feeling the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. I need to find out the truth. When Joshua arrived at his apartment complex, he made a beeline for Benita's apartment. He knocked on the door, and when Benita opened it, she looked surprised to see him. Joshua, we haven't seen you since yesterday. Is everything okay? She asked. Sorry, Benita. Something came up, and I have been really busy. Joshua replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Benita smiled and stepped aside to let him in. Well, it's good to see you. Come in. As soon as Joshua walked in, Archie rushed over to him and hugged him tightly. Daddy, I'm feeling much better now, Archie said, his face beaming with happiness. Joshua's heart swelled with love and relief. I'm so glad to hear that, buddy, he said, hugging Archie back. After some chat and playtime, Archie went to his room, leaving Joshua and Benita alone to talk. Joshua knew this was his chance to reveal the truth, but he was nervous about how Benita would react. Benita, there is something I need to tell you. Joshua began consciously, but I need you to promise not to get mad at me first. Benita raised an eyebrow. Her curiosity piqued. Okay, Joshua, I promise. What is it? Taking a deep breath, Joshua said, I ran a secret DNA test to find out if Archie is my son. The smile vanished from Benita's face, replaced by a look of shock and anger. You did what? She shouted, her voice rising in disbelief and fury. Why would you do such a thing? Benita, please understand. I had to know. There were too many coincidences, and I needed to find out the truth, Joshua explained, trying to calm her down. Have we ever met in the past? Benita's anger only intensified. How dare you invade her privacy like that? You had no right. She yelled, her eyes blazing with anger. Archie is my son, and you are not his father. Now, get out of my house. Joshua tried to apologize and explain, but Benita wouldn't listen. Leave us alone, Joshua. You betrayed our trust, she said, pushing him towards the door. Joshua felt a wave of guilt and regret as he stumbled out of the apartment. I'm sorry, Benita. I just needed to know, he said weakly. Don't come back, Joshua. You are not welcome here anymore, Benita said, slamming the door shut. Joshua stood outside the door, feeling crushed. He had hoped that revealing the truth would bring them closer, but instead, it has driven a wedge between them. He walked back to his apartment, his mind racing with thoughts of how to make things right. That night, Joshua couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the events of the day in his mind, wishing he could turn back time and handle things differently. He paced around his apartment, debating whether to go back and try to talk to Benita again. Eventually, he decided to give it a try. He walked over to their apartment and knocked on the door, but there was no response. He knocked again, calling out softly, Benita, please, I'm really sorry. But the door remained closed, and he had nothing from inside. Dejected, Joshua returned to his apartment. The next day, the situation didn't improve. Benita kept Archie away from him, and she wouldn't open the door whenever he knocked. Joshua felt he was losing everything he had come to care about. Desperate for a way to fix things, Joshua decided to seek advice from Maurice again. He called his friend and explained the situation. Maurice, she won't talk to me. She's keeping Archie away, and I don't know what to do, Joshua said, his voice filled with frustration and sadness. Josh, you need to give her some space. She's angry and feels betrayed. Let her cool down for a bit, Maurice advised. But what if she never forgives me? Joshua asked, feeling hopeless. You have to be patient and show her that you care about her and Archie. Prove to her that you are not just thinking about yourself, Maurice replied. Joshua nodded, knowing that Maurice was right. He needed to find a way to show Benita that he truly cared about their family and that he was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. In the following days, Joshua tried to find small ways to show his support and care without being intrusive. He left flowers and a note at Benita's door, apologizing again and expressing his sincere regret. He also left small gifts for Archie, hoping to remind them of the good times they had shared. Joshua knew it would take time to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, but he was determined to do everything in his power to make things right. As he waited for the result of his efforts, he held on to the hope that one day they could be a family again, stronger and closer than ever before. 3 days had passed, and Joshua felt the weight of Benita's silence pressing down on him. He knew he had to make things right, no matter what it took. Determined, he went to Benita's apartment and stood at her door, refusing to leave until she spoke to him. Benita, please, I need to talk to you, Joshua called out, his voice filled with desperation. After what felt like an eternity, the door finally opened, and Benita stood there with tears in her eyes. Joshua, do you have any idea how much you hurt me? She said, her voice trembling with emotion. You should have talked to me about your feelings and suspicions before carrying out a DNA test. Joshua felt a pound of guilt. I'm so sorry, Benita. I was scared to talk to you about it because we had issues the last time I asked about Archie's father. He explained, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. Benita looked at him for a long moment, the pain in her eyes slowly giving way to understanding. Come in, she said softly, stepping aside to let him enter. Joshua walked in, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. How is Archie? He asked, noticing the quietness of the apartment. I took Archie to my sister's place. That's why you haven't seen him, Benita replied, her voice still tinged with sadness. They sat down on the sofa, and Benita began to open up. Joshua, you need to understand my story, she said, taking a deep breath. Years ago, I had my heart broken by so many guys. They were all after their own selfish gains, and it made me lose interest in falling in love. Joshua listened intently, his heart aching for her. I'm so sorry you went through that, Benita. Well, I decided to go for IVF and have Archie, Benita continued. I wanted to have someone who could love me for real. I never met the donor, that's it. Joshua's eyes widened in shock. Memories flooded back as he recalled a desperate time after university when he couldn't find a job and needed money urgently. Benita, I think I know how this happened, he said slowly. Years ago, I donated sperm because I needed money. It was just once, and it was at a hospital near the university. They both looked at each other in disbelief, then mentioned the hospital's name in unison. That's it, they exclaimed together. The mystery was finally solved. Joshua and Benita sat in silence for a moment, processing the revelation. Then they started to talk, sharing their thoughts and feelings. I'm so sorry for not talking to you first, Joshua said, his voice filled with regret. I was just so confused and scared. I understand, Joshua, Benita replied, her tone softening. I'm sorry for shutting you out. I was hurt and didn't know how to handle it. They talked for hours, apologizing and promising to find a way to move forward together. The next day, Benita brought Archie back home. As soon as Archie saw Joshua, his face lit up with joy. Daddy! Archie shouted, running into Joshua's arms. Joshua hugged him tightly, feeling a rush of love and relief. Hey, buddy, I missed you, he said, his voice choked with emotion. Benita knelt beside them, her eyes filled with tears of happiness. Archie, there is something we need to tell you, she said gently. Joshua is your father. Archie's eyes widened in surprise. Then he jumped up and down with excitement. I knew it! I knew it! He shouted, hugging Joshua even tighter. It was a beautiful moment, filled with joy and love. They spent the rest of the day together, playing games and talking about their future as a family. As days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. Joshua and Benita started spending more time together, going on family outings and sharing their dreams and plans for the future. Archie was thrilled to have both his parents with him, and his happiness was evident in his every smile and laugh. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Joshua took Benita out to a quiet park. They walked hand in hand, enjoying the tranquility. Suddenly, Joshua stopped and turned to face Benita. Benita, there is something I want to ask you, he said, reaching into his pocket. Benita looked at him curiously. What is it, Joshua? Joshua got down on one knee, holding out a small velvet box. Benita, you have brought so much joy and love into my life. Will you marry me and make our family complete? Benita's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the ring, then at Joshua. Yes, Joshua, I will marry you, she said, her voice filled with happiness. They embraced, their hearts overflowing with love and hope for the future. The wedding was a beautiful celebration of their love and commitment. Maurice, Joshua's best friend, was there to support him, and the happiness on everyone's faces was infectious. After the wedding, Joshua, Benita, and Archie moved into a new home where they started their new life together. They created a home filled with love, laughter, and the promise of many happy years to come. Welcome home, everyone, Joshua said, opening the door to their new house. Yay! This is amazing! Archie shouted, running inside and exploring every room. Benita smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. This is just the beginning of our happy ever after, she said, holding Joshua's hand. Joshua nodded, his heart full. Yes, it is, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you both. And so, Joshua, Benita, and Archie lived happily ever after, their hearts forever intertwined by the bond of love and family. This story teaches us that honesty and trust are very important in our relationships. Joshua and Benita had a big problem because Joshua didn't tell Benita about his worries before doing the DNA test. If he had talked to her first, they might have solved the problem together without hurting each other. When we have questions or doubts, it's better to talk openly and honestly with people we care about. Trust is built when we share our feelings and listen to each other. Joshua and Benita learned to forgive and understand each other, which made their family stronger. Always remember, being honest and trusting each other can help us solve problems and keep our relationships happy and healthy. Thank you so much for watching this amazing story about Archie and his family on African Stories. If you liked it and felt inspired with their journey, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories and don't forget to turn the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.